In the novel The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin, Shevik is a brilliant physicist who has made a breakthrough that will change the world. The worlds, I should say, because this is a science fiction novel and there are many worlds that know about each other's existence. On Shevik's world, there are no possessions, there's no money, everyone takes what they need and gives what they can of their labor. It was born of a revolution in a kind of anarchistic socialism. He goes off to offer his breakthrough to the neighboring planet, Eurus, and the place he goes there is much like our own country. Everything is transactional. He has trouble getting used to the understanding that what he hears on the radio is mostly advertisements of things for sale, and that everything around him has been bought and sold. He doesn't want to sell his discovery, which they know about and know is valuable. And in a plea at the very end of the book, he says, "Is there no alternative to selling? Is there not such a thing as the gift?" Of course, there is. On Eurus, and in our own land, so obsessed with selling and buying. But it can be hidden under all of that transactionality, even in our most intimate relationships, as Kathy found. There's a story from my own life that stuck with me for many years. I was 16 years old. I was working in an ice cream store, scooping ice cream, my first job outside of babysitting, earning minimum wage, which seemed pretty amazing to me. Getting $4.55 an hour for this. I remember exactly what everything cost. Most people came in and got a single scoop, $1.20. Some people got a double, and that was $2.20 or $2.40. Once in a while, somebody would just get an $80 kids scoop. This was in New Haven, Connecticut, and lots of people were very, very poor, invisibly so, there in New Haven. One day, a man came in looking pretty ragged and asked how much the cheapest cone was. I said 80 cents. And I scooped it up for him and stood there as he pulled out money from his pockets, this sort of greasy coat, nickel and dime, bunch of pennies, a quarter. I thought, oh, thank God we're moving along. I stood there very awkwardly watching him pull out apparently every bit of money he had. Got to 64 cents, dug in his pockets. He kind of shrugged at me, and I shrugged at him and handed him the ice cream and took the 64 cents. Feeling bad all around. Feeling that I wasn't supposed to accept only 64 cents. I was cheating my employers of 16 cents plus tax. Feeling that surely I could be more generous than I was being. Now, of course, I would just say, oh, please, can I buy you an ice cream? And scoop him up a double and give my employer the $2.40, but I didn't have that wherewithal, not financially, but just in my mind, in my heart, I was steeped in this sense of scarcity. This isn't mine. I don't have any money. I can't just give things to people who come in. I don't know. It was painful because I felt I was insulting his dignity by making him pull out in pennies and nickels, not quite enough for an ice cream cone. And even now I realize that a lot of the feelings that I'm assuming were there in the room might not have been at all. Maybe that was granting him a lot more dignity than it would have been for a 16-year-old to offer him a gift of an ice cream cone. I don't know. I didn't ask him what he felt. I stuck with the transaction, and this story has stuck with me as a lesson in a fact I'd been steeped in my religious upbringing, which is that how we give and receive matters. I felt like there was something grudging about my end of that interaction, lacking in generosity. There was a 12th century Spanish Jewish philosopher named Moses ben Maimonides, he's known as, and that's how I had been brought up to think about these things, the how of giving and receiving. Maimonides said there was a ladder of charity. And the very top of the ladder, the 8 steps, the best way to give to somebody in need is to make them no longer dependent by a gift or a loan, by giving them a job or going into partnership with them, some way that you can launch them. Think the sort of teach somebody to fish idea. That's the best thing. The second best way to give is to give with anonymity all around. The giver does not know who is receiving, the recipient does not know from where comes their gift, their charity. And thus we see that for Maimonides, that sense of people's dignity, the shame, whether there should be shame or not, the shame of receiving, and the little tinge of pride, a pat on the back, even sometimes arrogance of giving. If we could take those out of the equation, that would be best. Third best, and about the third and fourth, we used to debate in Sunday school, which was better. The third best, he says, is when the giver knows who's receiving, but the recipient does not know who their benefactor is. And number 4 is the other way around. You give anonymously, say, to a foundation or something, and the recipient may know your name. The fifth best is to give directly into somebody's hand without being asked. You just see somebody in need. So translating there, I could have just said, I can see, not to assume from his clothes, but I certainly can once he starts pulling out the pennies and nickels. I can see that 80 cents is a lot for this guy. I could have just said, let me just make a present of this to you if you don't mind, sir. The sixth best is to give after being asked. The seventh is giving less than one ought to, but with gladness and good grace. And the eighth, the minimum way to give is grudgingly. What Maimonides doesn't go into a lot of detail about is the problem that Kathy raises. When is giving actually transactional? One half of a sale. This gift for a return of gratitude, another gift at the next holiday. The irony, of course, is that true gratitude really blossoms only when there's been a true gift. I mean, we all like to thank and be thanked, even in the freest situations of gift giving. You know, when we just We give the way we give to a friend. I saw something, it made me think of you, I thought you would love it, so I'm giving it to you. No occasion, no obligation, just I love you, and I wanted to give you something. Even their reciprocity, of course, is a part of things. We wouldn't long stay friends if gifts were always one-sided, but that sense of just spontaneously giving, well, that's when true gratitude comes. But Maimonides laid the groundwork for thinking about giving as a spiritual and emotional matter by spelling out it matters. It matters very much how one gives. Otherwise, the ladder of charity would simply be a list of amounts. The lowest is the lowest. The highest is the best. The more you give, the better. He wanted to make it perfectly clear, not so. Now, I keep using the word charity, but that is not the word that Maimonides used. He was speaking of tzedakah, the Hebrew word, which is used to mean charity, as in keep a tzedakah box in your house for putting money in and give it away when it fills up. But the word really means what is right. Justice. Tzedek, tzedakah. Of course, the word charity, you probably know, comes from caritas. It means love. So why do we have such negative connotations with the word charity? Carrying a sense of insult to one's dignity if one receives charity, carrying that sense of unwarranted pride from giving charity. What happens to all those icky connotations if we replace the word charity with love? I don't want to have to depend on love. Maybe we wouldn't feel that way if we felt we were receiving the love of our neighbors. Or what if we replaced it with justice? I try to give to justice every week. Here we are in a crisis of charity. One of our national programs of ensuring that everybody has enough to eat, or something like it. You see in the SNAP benefits crisis, some people who are outraged that 42 million people should need help via SNAP. Doesn't anyone want to work anymore? That is a direct quote. Go ahead, boo. Others point out that the vast majority of people on SNAP do work. Half of the total, full time. And they ask different questions. Why have we created an economic system in which a person can work 40 hours a week and be unable to afford food? And an even more important question, how shall we change it? Because as Shevek says elsewhere in that marvelous novel, The Dispossessed, we talk about economic laws. They're not laws. They're not like the laws of physics. They're not like gravity. We made them. Justice, tzedakah. How do we want to bring our system into alignment with justice? As for most of the rest of the people who receive SNAP, of course, it's because of their age. They're too young, many, many millions of children, or too old to work. or they have a disability that keeps them from bringing in a full-time income. So here too we could ask, what is the just way to ensure that people who otherwise would have trouble earning a living have enough to eat? What is a loving way to do it? Emotional accounting is a term for, well, what Kathy was describing. Applying financial principles to our relationships, friendships, marriages, the relationship between parent and child, cousin and cousin, or among members of a congregation. There are financial realities there, of course, but when we reduce emotional, spiritual connections to financial transactions, or things that act like them, if it's not money changing hands, maybe it's a Harry and David platter. When we do that, we lose something very important. What if we turned it around? What if instead of viewing the give and take of relationships through a financial lens, we viewed our economic, our financial relationships through an emotional and spiritual lens? Hey, we're in a congregation, folks. This is what we do. After all, an economy is made up of people. It's a bunch of relationships, a network of relationships. We have feelings about those relationships, about the people we employ and are employed by, about the people whose taxes fund things we care about, the people affected by our own taxes. When we bring emotional accounting into these conversations, we are doing what Maimonides did, saying not only the dollar amounts matter, but the how of giving and receiving. They are questions of tzedakah and caritas, justice and love. This gets scary. It gets scary for some people because, well, things get difficult when we look at the how of how money came our way, or didn't. Billie Eilish, very young, talented singer and songwriter, 23 or 24, I believe. And I learned this week that she is in possession of $44 million. I learned this because she gave a quarter of her wealth, not her income, a quarter of her wealth to food for those who need it. And she announced this when she was getting some kind of community award, and she challenged the billionaires in the audience, there were some, to do the same. Reportedly, this annoyed some of them, although I don't know if that's a fair interpretation of their facial expressions or amount of applause. I didn't see the video. What we do know is that there is a myth underlying wealth in this country, and Eilish, bless her, challenged it. The myth is the people with wealth earned it. They deserve it. These are terms of justice, right? Well, there's some common ground. We care about justice. When someone says it's unjust to ask them for any of it, or much less require much of it in taxes, they're speaking about what's fair. All right, well, let's talk about that. Obviously, if they think that, the proper feeling for those who receive anything from people as rich as Eilish and much, much richer, like the billionaires in the room, is gratitude. One-way gratitude, and in fact, indebtedness. Yeah? Not just financial, but emotional. So I want to be clear. By giving away 1/4 of her wealth, Eilish left herself with over $33 million, more than anyone would ever need. She didn't impoverish herself, nor did she claim to, nor did she have to. She did the decent thing. She acted out of love for her community when it became clear that her country was going to leave people literally starving. If Mark Zuckerberg, who was in attendance, gave away 1/4 of his wealth, no, let's do a different math problem. If he gave away 99.5% of his wealth, he would still be a billionaire. I know, the mind boggles, right? A millionaire 1,000 times over, just in case you need to know. Now, do they deserve their money? Eilish and Zuckerberg have both created things that people want. That's how they made money. They sold things that people were willing to pay for. I like her music. I like using Facebook. So I'm not saying that they shouldn't be getting money for those things, but by no measure are they more deserving of their riches than the best kindergarten teacher I have ever seen. Well, I was fortunate enough for him to be my daughter's kindergarten teacher. Right? I mean, if we want to talk about what people deserve, he does good work, he works hard, he does something that's important, that everybody agrees is important and valuable in our society, and he makes, well, nobody goes into kindergarten teaching to be rich. I'm sure he'd be embarrassed if he thought I was suggesting he should be. But can we all agree he shouldn't have to worry about money? He should have enough. Enough for everything he and his family need, and a little sprinkling of luxuries. The market doesn't reward these things, that's all. It isn't based on tzedakah or caritas. So the first thing we could do is stop pretending that it is, because that's an insult. Let's just say Billie Eilish produces beautiful music that a lot of people want to listen to, and so they give her money for it. Okay. Let's not pretend that that's more worthwhile. $44 million worth more worthwhile than what other people do. We could fix it. That's the other thing. We could fix it. We made this system and we can remake it. And in the meantime, we can fix our own attitudes toward giving and receiving, because they look a lot different in the light of justice and love. Most giving has a mixture of motives. And it all takes place within complex, sometimes unjust, maybe always unjust systems, both the small relational systems of a family and the large ones of a nation of 350 million people. So we're often left with conflicting feelings: love, inadequacy, sympathy, guilt. If we can know our own motivations and observe dispassionately the passions that make us want to give, then we can discover great riches. That's the kind of emotional accounting that we could be doing. What's in here? Not the riches in our pockets and bank accounts, but if we clear away the unpleasant feelings and unworthy motives that are always a little mixed into our giving, we can discover that under them are other richer reasons. Ones that will give us joy, ones that will make the gift more meaningful to the one that receives it, and release a sense of abundance and generosity in us. Not that fear and scarcity and is somebody going to get away with something that keeps us holding on tight. There are always joyful, loving reasons to give. They lurk under the guilt and duty and resentment and social pressure and social appearances and Once we've acknowledged all of those, they emerge and they shine and they show us the way to a life that overflows with gifts. So may it be.